Imagine the most horrifying crime you can think of. Now multiply that horror by 10. That's the brutal murder of Sylvia Likens. This heinous act, committed in the mid-20th century, sent shockwaves across America, forever etching a mark of terror on the nation's psyche. Sylvia Likens, an ordinary girl born on the 3rd of January 1949 in Indianapolis, Indiana, lived a life that was anything but ordinary. In the summer of 1965, her mother Betty was incarcerated for shoplifting. This misfortune left Sylvia and her sister Jenny in the hands of Gertrude Banisewski. Gertrude, initially a seemingly responsible and caring guardian, became the architect of a haunting nightmare for Sylvia. The young girl was subjected to relentless, unspeakable abuse, both physical and psychological. The true depth of the horror that Sylvia experienced is difficult to fathom. And yet, this was only the beginning of Sylvia Likens' nightmare. With her mother in jail and no other family to turn to, Sylvia Likens found herself in the care of Gertrude Banisewski. Little did she know, her life was about to become a living nightmare. At first glance, Gertrude Banisewski seemed like a saving grace, a woman who stepped up to provide a home for two vulnerable girls when no one else would. However, the initial impressions of her as a responsible and caring guardian would soon shatter into a million pieces. Beneath the surface simmered a cruel and sadistic nature. It didn't take long for Gertrude's true colors to show. The facade of a caring guardian was soon replaced by an oppressive tormentor. Sylvia was subjected to relentless and escalating abuse, both physical and psychological, at the hands of Gertrude and her children. Sylvia's life turned into a daily battle for survival. The home that was supposed to be her safe haven became the very place where her dignity and innocence were stripped away. The nightmare escalated and the abuse grew more brutal with each passing day. Gertrude, aided by her children, seemed to derive a perverse pleasure from inflicting pain and suffering on the helpless girl. Each day brought new horrors. Sylvia was starved, beaten, and tortured in unimaginable ways. She was treated less like a human being and more like an object of hatred and scorn. The psychological torment was equally, if not more, devastating. Sylvia was isolated, humiliated, and subjected to constant emotional abuse. This was not just a case of child abuse, it was a systematic campaign of dehumanization. Despite the unimaginable horrors she experienced, Sylvia remained resilient. She clung to hope, even as her world crumbled around her. But the relentless torment took a toll on her spirit, and her physical health began to deteriorate. The horror was far from over. Sylvia's ordeal was about to take an even darker turn. The nightmare was only just beginning. What lay ahead was a shocking climax to this horrifying tale of abuse and torment. The murder of Sylvia Likens had yet to reach its chilling crescendo. As Sylvia's plight worsened, the shocking conclusion was drawing near. A conclusion that would stun the nation. The final days leading up to Sylvia's death were a terrifying crescendo of brutality. Gertrude's abuse escalated to unthinkable levels, with the innocent girl being subjected to unspeakable acts of violence. This was no longer a case of neglect. It had turned into a horrifying display of human cruelty. Sylvia's world had spiraled down into a pit of despair and torment. Her days were filled with agony, her nights with terror. The house that was meant to be her haven had become a living nightmare. The guardian who was supposed to protect her had morphed into a malevolent tormentor. Despite the relentless abuse, Sylvia never lost her spirit. She fought for her life with a courage that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. But the odds were against her. The relentless brutality was too much for her young body to bear. On October 26, 1965, Sylvia Likens drew her last breath. She died alone, in a house filled with people who had turned a blind eye to her suffering. Her death was a brutal end to a life that had been filled with promise. It was an ending that shocked, not just the community, but the entire nation. News of Sylvia's murder sent shockwaves across the nation. The sheer brutality of the crime, the callous indifference of those who could have prevented it, left people stunned and horrified. It sparked a nationwide conversation about child abuse and how society could let such a tragedy occur. The impact of Sylvia's death was far-reaching. It changed laws, it changed attitudes, and it changed minds. It forced people to confront the dark corners of human nature, to acknowledge that such cruelty could exist within a seemingly ordinary home. Sylvia Likens' tragic tale is a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty, a story that continues to haunt us to this day. It is a story of a young girl's courage in the face of unimaginable torment, and the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken, even in the face of death.